Hello, my name is Shania Coloma and welcome back to my channel. Around a year ago, on May 20th, 2024, I graduated from film school. I graduated from California State University, Long Beach with a BA in Film and Electronic Arts, Narrative Production. I just want to sit here and talk about my film school experience. Was film school worth it? To hopefully give insight to anyone who's interested to going to Cal State Long Beach for film school, or just interested about my take on film school in general. So I went to Cal State Long Beach from fall 2020 to spring 2024. I was a narrative production major and my track was directing and production. So I feel like a lot of this video is going to be pertained to my track of directing and production, and I could also talk a lot about the cinematography track. I want to preface this. I was a part of the last graduating class to have the film department be Film and Electronic Arts. In this past academic school year of fall 2024 to spring 2025, they actually have changed the curriculum and they've also changed the department name to Cinematic Arts. So I feel like I still think my film school experience is still worth talking about and still giving insight, but as well as please take this as a grain of salt because things have changed from a year's time to the curriculum. So yeah, I actually started school in the pandemic. I started fall 2020, which really meant that my first 2 years of school were mainly online. I also want to make it known that I actually really wanted to make this video right after I graduated, but I think it is important to look at my graduation with the lens of being a year afterward, because I want to be able to give that post-grad perspective on film school and on my life and just have more things to say now that I haven't been to school in over a year. I also want to preface that a majority of this is all my opinion, and I want you all to take that with a grain of salt. So why did I go to film school specifically? For me, I know you don't need a degree to get into the film industry. I feel like so many people know that. You don't need a degree. What drew me into film was being in high school and being in an arts academy and getting into like film and making short film. I knew at the end of high school that I really enjoyed making films, and I felt like it was the only thing that I could like see myself doing, and I really enjoyed it. But even after the end of high school, I feel like for me, I didn't know what I wanted to get into. I didn't know if I wanted to be a director or a producer or like doing director of photography, like cinematography stuff. I was still like trying to find what I liked about the aspect of filmmaking, and I knew going into film school could help me make that decision, and hopefully by the end of the 4 years I kind of have more of an understanding of what the industry is like and what I wanted to do in the industry and what my goals are. And overall, I just feel like I really wanted to go to films. I have my computer, by the way. I wrote a whole outline of what I wanted to say. But I feel like for me, film school, I really wanted to learn. I was in the beginning, so open to learning. Let's get into it. What film school was actually like. For the first 2 years, plus with having COVID, at Cal State Long Beach, you still have to take like your regular GEs. I still had like a math class. I still had history. I had to take a science class, but it's also like my first few film classes in my first 2 years were mainly theory. Majority of my classes were more theory than activity based because it was pandemic and it was my first 2 years of classes. So I feel like you are going to just learn more theory. So I had to take like media aesthetics and history of broadcasting. But yeah, mainly in your first 2 years, you will take like your regular GEs, and then you'll take some supplementary film classes. At the end of your sophomore year, you have to declare a track, and I declared mine in narrative production in the directing and production track. And so with the curriculum has changed now, narrative production is not a thing anymore. if they only had it for a year after mine. So spring 2025 cohort is the last narrative production cohort. But basically, spring 2022, I had to submit a submission to get into the narrative production major because they only accepted 40 students. 20 students in the directing and production track and 20 students in the cinematography track. And from what I have heard, the reason why they did this was because of having a smaller teacher to student ratio, but also having enough equipment to go around to make the senior films. And so, but by doing this, it really makes such a competitive nature around a narrative production student and around a theory of practice student. If you didn't get into narrative production, you were going into theory of practice of cinema. I'm trying to remember. So narrative production holds, the major holds the directing and production track, and then the cinematography track. Those were narrative production. And then theory and practice was screenwriting, it was post-production, it was documentary, it was production management. Those tracks were in there. But the thing is, more than 40 people applied to get into narrative. And because of this competitive nature, I feel like it really stemmed the built-in, like, oh, like you're in narrative production, you must seem like you're super like egotistical and you must think you're so highly of yourselves. But I feel like for me, I just got lucky. It created a pressure between those who were narrative production students and those who were theory of practice students. And I understand, I feel like there's so many talented individuals and I know would have thrived in narrative production, like they didn't get in. And it's just like, it's so unfair because who's to say that those people aren't as qualified as the people who got in, you know? And I think that is the reason why they got rid of it, because they're trying to make it more fair and more open. There's just so much like animosity, I don't know how to say the word, animosity between those two tracks. And I had friends in the other track and they would like help on my projects and stuff like that, but it is just unfair, really, that people who wanted to be in cinematography or directing and applied, and they go to school and this is what they want to do and they pay for their education, and it's like, oh, you didn't get in, so you're gonna have to choose something else. And it's so unfair. I think it really is so unfair. But I'm glad they have changed it now. But the thing is, it's like a lot of people are now in those tracks and they're trying to and they try to like make it fair and all of that. And I know there's different things that are being implemented to make it more fair. I also want to say I am a directing and production track. My degree on paper, it doesn't say my track. It just says, I think, BA Film and Electronic Arts and Narrative Production. It doesn't say my track in it, which is kind of like, yeah. And I also want to preface this. I was a directing and production track, but I only took one directing class. They only have one directing class at Cal State Long Beach from when I graduated. I think that has changed now. But I took, in my junior year, a Production 1 cinematography class, and then in spring, a Production 2 lighting class. Those classes, 6 hours. 6 hours. And it was interesting to learn, I would say, the whole cinematography aspect and all that. But like, I didn't want to be a cinematographer. Like, I was learning about foot candles and like placing lights and like grips and whatever, but it's just like, I'm a directing track, but I'm paying to learn about something that I am not interested in and I knew I didn't want to be doing after college. And I felt it was just so unfair. And I understand I was put in those classes because they were production classes, so for me to learn more about like production and just like how sets were run and all that. I value that experience greatly, but it's just those tests were really hard and really difficult. I remember studying my ass off on those tests and still getting a bad grade on them because for me, it was really difficult to wrap my head around all of the knowledge. And it's a 6-hour class. Like, we had lecture and then activity. The activities were fun. I feel like we've been able to like take what we learned from lecture, but the 6 hours is crazy to me for a class like that, you know, and for something that like I knew I wasn't going to take this in after college, you know. Oh, but I know that they actually, from the next class, the last cohort of narrative production, they actually changed it from 6 hours to 4 hours. So I don't think they have any more 6-hour classes now, but yeah, I think they're all 4 hours now. Access to equipment and facilities. Okay, so you may be thinking, you're in film school, maybe you could use some of the school's equipment to pursue your own passion projects. That is wrong. You can't, which kind of sucks. You can't use school equipment for non-school projects. And I understand this in the sense of like liability. If things break, all of that, then you need to have a purpose to using the equipment. And I understand that. So, but it just kind of sucks that it's like, oh, like all these things that I'm learning and all that, and you have a film idea, and it's just like, oh, you can't make that with the school's equipment. Sorry, you're just gonna try to either, I don't know, rent outside or find someone else that has a camera, you know? If this matters to you, a majority of scripted shorts that are being filmed for Cal State Long Beach projects are mainly on Blackmagic cameras. I don't think we have any RE or Reds or anything like that. They're mainly just Blackmagics. To me, I didn't really have a problem with that. I think they were really easy to use. And yeah, I don't know if that is important to you, but I figured I'd say it. To the post people, we did get a new Foley room studio. They unveiled it in my last semester I was there. I was able to do post-production sound in there and do some ADR in that room, and I think it was really cool. And we also have they had like 2 new sound editing bays, so when you're almost done with your film and you finish the post-production sound on it, tweaking little things while you're able to look at the screen of your film and having all like the sound stuff going on. But yeah, that they have that as well. They also have a studio, but it is mainly for classes and projects for school projects. If you're not a senior, a lot of the equipment you will get for your junior projects or even grades below are not going to be that much. And I think it's just because they give everything mainly to the seniors. I think that comes at a pros and a con a little bit. I feel like having limited equipment makes you think more creatively on what you want to do and how you want to shoot things, how you want to set deck things and all of that. But it's also like, that sucks, they only give you like 2 lights. So yeah, you could like, it's a pro and a con. But also like I knew during like my junior film season, a lot of my people in our film groups had their own lights that they were able to bring in, but of course they are uninsured because the school won't insure personal gear. Yeah. And also, as a woman of color, there are not many female professors at Cal State Long Beach in the film department. In the film department. Majority of them are white male, and that isn't a bad thing, but it's also just like, if that is important to you, I wanted to talk about that because it's all about representation, you know? And even like for me, for being a woman of color trying to get into the film industry, I think it would have been really encouraging to have a female film professor. I actually think, now that I think about it, I only had one female film professor. Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like that's crazy. Out of my entire 4 years of college, I've only had one female film professor. And it's not a bad thing, but it's also just like, there isn't a lot of female representation in the film industry itself, and I think it would have been really cool to have a female film professor. For me, coming from someone who had to take a lot of cinematography classes, I think if you're going to Cal State Long Beach, I think Cal State Long Beach is such a great school for cinematography. If you really want to get into it, if you're interested in it, I think it is a great school for that. And I think some of our best professors are in cinematography for sure. And because they have a lot of knowledge, but I do have to say that a lot of them have their own teaching styles. I had a professor that I felt like their teaching style didn't really align with how I learned. So I would just take that as a grain of salt. I would say that I've heard a lot of good things about screenwriting, but I can't really attest to post-production or production management just because I haven't like been in that environment with those professors before. But I would say cinematography, really great, and screenwriting. I don't know where this is going to fit in all of this, but I think it's important to talk about. Film school tries to prepare you for the real world. And though I feel like there's a lack in transparency in that, because I feel like film professors do everything they can to ingrain these meticulous, these little details, and for you to have the best potential on set. And I feel like it is so important to know when it's time to stop to try to perfect something and continue on and get into a shot. And I know this might be weird to fit this in here, but it is part of my film school experience that I felt like the pressure of the classroom to get things right was transcended into the pressure on set to try to get things right. For instance, I was an assistant director on a short film, and the DP was trying to get a shot of a really tiny bottle of the font or the text on a really tiny bottle. They took forever to get this shot, and I think they were trying like different methods, different ways to light it, like lens change, whatever. But it's also like, how important is this to the story? How important is this bottle to the story? And also them trying to change it and revise it. It's like we're losing time. And at the end of the day, it's like I would rather get a shot in than a shot not in. And it's like I feel like film professors in film school does that to you, where it's like you have to, I feel like any film major, I think we're all such big perfectionists, and I think it is because of the way that film professors and the way film school ingrains these ideas into you. Like, you have to think about this, you have to think about that, like da 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 da. And it's just like, we're in film school to make mistakes, and this is the time to make mistakes and not to get everything right. The pressure of film school to try for things to be perfect because you don't want to go into class the next day and have your professor critique and shit on your project. It's like, it's crazy. And I'm not saying shit on your project, but I feel like I've had professors where we film something on the weekend and then we have dailies, which is the clips that we filmed on the weekend, and we show them in class. And one professor just being like, oh, you did this wrong, and you did this wrong, and you did this wrong. And it just made me feel like crap. And I was just like, okay, next time I'm gonna do this, this, and this. And that's important. But it's also just like having that pressure, the pressure of perfectionism is so it's so like you need to let it go. And I feel like there are definitely some professors that have that perfectionism was ingrained perfectionism into their students, but I feel like that is so harmful. I also want to say film school does not give a flying fuck about any of the classes you may have. I was in a class my spring semester of junior year called 336. And I know so many of my friends are like, just got a headache as I said those three numbers. But 336 was essentially a production class. We got into like different groups, and you were going to, by the end of the semester, you are going to like help each other in your group on your other members' projects, but you would direct and write a project, but you would also DP one, and you would also produce and first AD one, and then you would also be sound recorder someone, and you also be sound like, and you also be a gaffer on one. And literally, it was required to be on 8 of those sets. And mind you, this is being a part of that class was like all my attention went to that class only. Every other class I felt like I felt so far behind. I felt so immensely stressed over this one class. You have to have meetings for every single one of these productions. You have to location scout. You have to a shot list. You have to make the shooting schedule. You have to do all of these different things for all of these different projects. And did I have time to write an essay for my English class? No, I didn't. I was not thinking about that. I was just thinking about this one class. And that's the thing. I feel like going through that literal stress ball, it was terrible on my mental health. And yes, I had a film at the end of the semester, but it's also like, did I make time to talk to my family? Did I take the time to really check in with myself and make sure that I was okay throughout all of this process? No, it's like with the level of perfectionism that our professors want us to have and throwing us into this like mess of trying to figure out all these films. It's just like I was so stressed out. And a lot of these sets are very physically draining and also very time consuming as well. Your weekends, your Saturdays and Sundays were all booked on from sets. So no personal, no free time, barely any free time to even do your homework for your other classes. And I felt like I was just drowning. And I feel like so many other people have shared the same sentiment. And the thing is, with this new curriculum change, they actually changed it. I think it's called 305. And the current students who were in this class actually made a petition and put it online because of how stressful this class is. And it's just like, I feel like that they really did not care about our mental health through that process, because it's like I had other things to do. We have a life outside of film school, and sometimes it's hard to remember that because it's like your whole world and everything is in this process. From my experience, we didn't get any financial help for our films junior year and below. Only financial help that went towards was the senior projects. I know documentary had a sum of money that they were allowed to spend on their senior projects, as well as the scripted narrative shorts. I wrote and directed a script, and they only make 10 senior films. Each senior film got $3,000.
Hello, future editing Shania here. I actually found out they're making 15 senior films this coming year. I don't know how that process is gonna look like. I think 15 is very generous when 10 was hard enough for the whole year. So yeah, we'll just have to see, but that is what I've heard from other people. So I'm kind of curious to see how those will turn out. But with it being 15, half of the budget is getting cut from 3,000 to 1,500, I think someone has told me. So yeah. I don't know. Running 1,500 for a senior film is really low budget. And like I talk about next or whenever in the video, we were barely able to survive off 3,000 and needed way more than that. So I don't know, we'll see.
Some of money definitely did help, but it was definitely not enough. And I think other people share that same sentiment as well, that $3,000 for a 10-minute short film, I don't think it was enough. I think by the end, I have spent over $2,000 outside of that 3K. So I don't know if I'll put that in, but yeah, there is no financial help. I remember even with my junior film in the whole 336 process, I spent, it was only like $500 on my film, but I know other people that probably spent more. So what I gained, even though I've talked about majority of the cons of film school, I feel like for me, I really understood what production life is like and all the different departments in production. And even though I was in that class where in 336 I had to do all these different positions that I may not have wanted to, I think it taught me to look in the perspective of a gaffer or look in the perspective of the DP, and just like that changes my perspective on how I go into sets, because I'm like, I know I have experience working in all these different types of roles. Even though I had only taken one directing class, I feel like I learned a lot from that directing class. I may not have liked the professor, but I feel like I learned a lot on how to direct actors and how what I should be looking for in an actor or actress in the audition room and how those should be set up. And I feel like I definitely take a lot of that, and especially for like any of my other friends who weren't in narrative and were directing their own things, I would give them my advice of what I learned in my directing class, and it seemed to help them. Being in that directing class really made me feel a lot more comfortable with the idea of going into directing, because I feel like when you hear someone, oh, I want to be a director, and I feel like getting into that class, I'm like, oh, this is what it's going to be like, and this is what it's like to be a director. I also really enjoyed being a first assistant director on set. I think it is a position that I would have loved to learn more, but there isn't any assistant directing classes, and I wish there was. Maybe there may be one day in the future, but I feel like I learned a lot by being an AD, and I actually really enjoyed it. So enjoyed it, but it was chaotic. What I gained from film school ultimately was the connections. It was working with my peers. My classmates became my friends, because when you're spending all of this time, like 12-hour days, 3 12-hour days on set, you're gonna make friends, you're gonna get to know each other. Yeah, your friends are your collaborators, your peers are your collaborators. I also feel like I got to make a project, especially my senior film, for it being so vulnerable. If you want to check out the trailer for Rubenesque, I'll link it somewhere. But I feel like creating that project was such a huge moment in my life, because it was such a vulnerable piece of art that I'm very happy to make, and I had such a great crew helping me make it, and I take that project, I feel like, forever with me. Any big surprises? Film school, it low-key feels like high school, and there's a lot of drama, and I'm not gonna lie, some people have really big egos, but this goes to, I feel like, to any film school, and I feel like a lot of what I'm saying could probably go to any film school. But yeah, you are going to meet people with big egos. You're going to meet people who think they're all that. And yeah, it's definitely gonna be a time to like navigate those. I feel like it's really hard being in film school but still navigating your non-film classes. I feel like you are kind of in this huge bubble, and you may forget that, like, oh yeah, you have like science homework that is due, like, oh, you have an essay. Like, I remember literally before I was going into production for my senior film, the day before, I had to turn in an essay. I was just like grinding out an essay that I really didn't care about. I remember crying on the phone with my DP, being like, I don't know if I could do this and all of that. And it was such a it's such a different time of my life, where like I felt like I didn't have enough time for things. For a semester of tuition at Cal State Long Beach, for me it was around $3,500, and in comparison to big schools like AFI, Chapman, any of the UC schools, that is so cheap in comparison. And I feel like for the education that I got, and I am still grateful to have received an education and at that price. I do say that film school does limit you in certain ways. I know that there's rules about what you can write about. Majority of the films that were wrote up and pitched about drug depiction weren't chosen. You can't film in moving cars. You can't near bodies of water. Like arson, you can't, like, I don't think you could do that. Like, no weapons. But some people have gotten away with that. But life after graduation, post-production, what is Shania doing after film school? Ever since for my first year of film school, I have just been working part-time as a videographer and editor for a company. And in my other time, I try to be on set whenever I can, or try to pursue more creative projects on the side with friends, with strangers I've barely met and showed up on set. Yeah, I just try to, I think for me especially, the job landscape in the film industry right now is terrible. You could look at a job on LinkedIn and see that it has 100 applicants and feel like, oh, I don't feel like applying because there's so many other people too. And a lot of the jobs that are being put out there are very, very competitive, very competitive. And it's really hard to get a job in the industry without making a connection, without a network. I think for me, it's been hard to stay motivated to continue being in the industry just because of how unstable all of it is and how crazy and like no job security, but I think that's what you do when you sign up to be in film school.
One thing I wish I talked about in the video, but will add it now, is trying to stay creative after college. Trying to stay creative when being creative is not the priority, in the sense that you have like other things you have to worry about now, which you could have already been worrying about that, like with housing, putting food on the table. It's hard to worry or want to be creative and still have the motivation to be creative after college. But I think it's important to stay motivated. And I mean, look at me, it's taken me a long time to edit this video. And also, having no deadline. I realized I liked having a deadline, especially with my senior film, knowing that it was going, by the end of the school year, I was going to have a 10-minute short film to my name. But now having no deadline, I feel like it's much harder to be creative. But I guess that's what the real world is. You may work on a short film and have on the backlog for years and years and years until you finally get the opportunity to make it. So I think staying motivated and staying creative during a time where that may not be a priority is hard, especially after pursuing a art degree for 4 years. So I wanted to add that little thing in the video because it's been hard, and I think it will continue to get harder, but you need to have motivation and you need to have the passion for your project.
I think it's really hard to stay motivated, to be honest, but I think you have to find ways to motivate yourself. And I feel like for me, being on set always recharges me and motivates me to continue being in this industry. And also, I just want to say, like, film school won't give you an automatic job into something. I feel like that comes very, very rare to people. And if you have that expectation of like, oh, I'm gonna direct this thing right after film school and it's gonna have a big backing and budget from like, that's just very unrealistic. That could happen, but it's very unrealistic. Yeah, so right now, just trying to freelance on the side, trying to do more paid videography for people, trying to be on set, hopefully getting a paid gig set soon. I would love to be on a feature film. But throughout all of this, throughout film school, I know this was kind of a more negative video, but I just wanted to be open and honest about my feelings towards film school. I am someone who moved to Long Beach for film school. I'm from the Coachella Valley, and you may know Coachella Music Festival, all that. They don't really have many film-related things you could do out there. And coming from someone who did not know anything about this industry, a girl who just liked to make skits and make really random YouTube videos in her time, going into film school was so eye-opening to me, and I learned so much. Yes, there are negative things about film school, but there were so many pros for me because I feel like I was just able to learn and open myself to learning that I knew I wouldn't have gone if I didn't go to film school. Like if I just stayed home. And I'm so grateful that I got to experience these things. I wrote down this in my notes, so I'm gonna read word for word. But being someone who has no connections to the industry at all, nothing, doesn't know anyone in the industry, didn't know where to start, didn't understand the concept of how a production set was ran, I feel like film school gave me that foundation. It gave me a foundation that I could build off of. And am I here to say that you need to go to film school to make that foundation? No, there are many other ways to build that foundation for success. And film school for me was just that, because I feel like I wouldn't have been able to learn even if I were to just go into the industry after high school, because I didn't know where to go. I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't know how to approach being on set. I feel like I would have made so many more mistakes that probably would have been more severe to my career if it wasn't for film school, because film school allows you to make mistakes. And I feel like I'm so grateful for that. This was my film school experience and all of that, the negative, the positive. I really wanted to touch on my experience, but I also want you all to remember that this is only my experience, and to please take it as a grain of salt and do your own research. I really hope this was helpful to those who are interested in going to film school in general, who are interested to going to Cal State Long Beach. But yeah, and then again, the whole curriculum has changed, and I know some people are fond of the new change, some people aren't. So it really has to say when time will tell on how the film program now is working out. But yeah, if you're interested in keeping up with all my film related things or my creative pursuits, my Instagram is shania.coloma.creative. I hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.